The moon was dying. Its once silver surface had turned gray and cracked. Cold winds crawled across the barren ground, carrying dust that shimmered like ashes. In the middle of this silent world stood a man named Elias Rayner, a human engineer who had been forgotten by everyone he once called home. His ship had crashed 3 weeks ago during a mission to repair an outpost on the lunar frontier. The explosion had burned half the station and torn away the communication tower. Since that day, no signal had reached Earth. No rescue ship had answered. He was alone, completely alone. Every morning, Elias walked out of the wreckage with his oxygen mask pressed tight to his face. He would scan the sky and whisper into the dead radio. "This is Elias Rayner, survivor of the Artemis mission. Can anyone hear me?" Silence always answered. Then he would sit on a broken metal beam and look at the horizon, where the stars felt close enough to touch yet too far to save him. His rations were almost gone, his oxygen tanks half empty. He had started counting his breaths, saving every movement. Still, some small spark inside him refused to fade. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was human stubbornness, but he kept believing someone would come. On the 22nd night, the moon's thin sky burned red for a moment. Elias thought it was a solar flare or a hallucination. Then he saw something moving through the dust. At first he thought it was a ghost, a glowing shape with long hair shining like molten silver. It walked upright, smooth, and graceful, as if gravity itself bowed in respect. When the light came closer, Elias realized it was a woman, tall, otherworldly, her eyes glowing faint crimson through the helmet-less void. He froze, afraid to blink. The figure stopped a few feet away. Her voice reached him without sound, directly inside his mind. "You should not be here, human," she said. Elias stumbled back, his breath quick and shallow. He tried to speak, but the words broke apart in his throat. She looked at him with calm curiosity, not hunger or hate, only strange sadness. Then, like mist, she vanished into the storm, leaving only a trail of faint red light. Elias spent that night shaking inside his shelter, replaying her image again and again. Was she real, an alien, an angel, or just his dying brain dreaming? He told himself it didn't matter. Tomorrow he would find her again. Because that spark of life he had almost lost suddenly burned bright. At dawn, he followed the path of red dust where she had stood. The sky had turned pale gold from the nearby star. Far in the distance, he saw a canyon that he had never noticed before, glowing faintly from within. When he climbed down, he found ruins, pillars of crystal, ancient symbols carved into the rock. It looked like the remains of a forgotten city buried under centuries of silence. Then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned slowly, and there she was again, closer than before. Her armor gleamed like liquid moonlight, her hair floated as if underwater, and her eyes held the calm of endless time. "I warned you," she said softly, "but you came anyway." Elias managed to whisper, "Who are you?" She tilted her head slightly, her lips almost smiling. "Once, my people ruled this moon," she said. "Now only I remain." The ground shook suddenly, the cave above them cracked, and a blinding flash tore through the air. Elias fell as dust rained down. The woman moved faster than human eyes could follow, catching him before the rocks crushed his body. Her cold hands gripped his chest, and he felt something sharp brush against his neck. Fangs, yet gentle. Her voice whispered, "Be still, human, you are safe." When the rumbling stopped, she laid him on the ground, her red eyes glowing brighter. Elias looked at her and saw not a monster, but a queen of the void. "Why did you save me?" he asked weakly. Her answer was quiet, like the echo of a dying star. "Because this moon chose you," she said, "and so did I." The wind outside howled through the ruins. Elias stared at her, unable to move, unable to speak. For the first time since the crash, he was not alone. And somewhere deep inside, the dying moon began to live again. Elias woke with the sound of soft humming echoing through the ruins. It was not the wind or the machines. It was her, the strange woman who had saved him. She sat beside the faint glow of a red crystal, her eyes closed, her pale hands moving slowly over a wound on her arm that healed before his eyes. For a long time he simply watched her, unsure whether to be afraid or amazed. When she opened her eyes, he flinched. "You are still here," she said, her tone calm. almost musical. Elias nodded, his throat dry. You saved me. She tilted her head. You are human, fragile, yet stubborn. You should have died many nights ago. He tried to smile, but it turned into a sigh. Humans don't die easy, he said quietly. Her lips curved slightly, as if the idea amused her. She rose and walked closer, every movement smooth like flowing water. I am Seraphine, she said, last of the lunar kind, daughter of the Crimson Line. Her name carried power, and even the dust around her seemed to shimmer when she spoke. Elias whispered his own name. Elias Rayner, engineer, survivor. Her gaze softened. Engineer, she repeated. A builder, not a destroyer. That is rare among your kind. They stepped outside into the fading light. The sky above the moon was painted with ribbons of red and silver. From the canyon walls hung ancient banners torn by centuries of silence. Elias looked around in awe. This place, it's not human. Who built it? Seraphine looked at the horizon. My people did. Long before your Earth was born, we were warriors, dreamers, and drinkers of stars. She led him toward a tall black spire half buried in dust. Inside, strange machines still pulsed faintly with crimson energy. Seraphine touched one of them, and it came to life, showing lights and symbols he couldn't understand. This moon once bled energy, pure and living, she said. But the war drained it. The blood of my kin turned the soil cold. Her voice trembled slightly, the first sign of sorrow he had heard from her. Elias stepped forward. I can fix power systems, if you show me what they need. She looked at him with surprise, as if she had not expected him to offer help. Why would you care for a dead world? She asked. He smiled weakly. Because maybe saving something here means saving myself. For a moment, her expression changed, and he felt her mind brush against his. Warm, curious, searching. Then she stepped closer, close enough that he could see reflections of stars in her red eyes. You speak like a king, she whispered, but you bleed like prey. Her fangs glimmered slightly in the dim light, and his heart pounded. Yet she did not strike. Instead, she reached out and touched his chest where his heart beat. This pulse, she said, is louder than the moon's heart. It refuses to stop. She turned away suddenly, her cloak swirling like smoke. Follow me, human, she commanded. They descended deeper into the ruins until they reached a vast chamber filled with floating crystals, each glowing faintly with trapped light. This was our sanctum, she said, where the royal line kept the heart of the moon alive. She placed her hand on a large crystal at the center, and it flickered weakly. The heart is dying, she whispered. Without it, the moon will collapse, and my existence will end. Elias stepped forward, scanning the device, tracing cables and symbols. It's a generator, he muttered. I can link your energy cores, reroute the flow, but I'll need power. Seraphine looked at him, eyes sharp. My blood is power, she said simply. He hesitated. That could kill you. She smiled faintly. I am already dead. When she cut her palm and let a drop of glowing crimson fall onto the machine, it roared to life. The ground shook, the air trembled, and the crystal blazed with living light. Elias shielded his face as the whole chamber brightened. When it was over, Seraphine stood weak but unbroken, her eyes glowing brighter than before. You have given breath to a dying world, she said softly, and now the moon remembers you. Elias smiled, breathing hard. Guess that makes us even. But she shook her head slowly. No, human, now you belong to the moon, and to me. Her words echoed through the chamber like a promise and a curse. Elias stared at her, realizing he had not just repaired a machine, he had awakened an ancient bond. The vampire princess had claimed him, not out of hunger, but destiny. Outside, the dying moon pulsed once again with faint crimson light. And somewhere deep within its heart, something ancient began to stir. The moon breathed again. For the first time in centuries, faint light shimmered through the cracks of its dead surface. Elias stood beside Seraphine, both silent as the ancient structures hummed with life. The red glow bathed them in warmth, and for a short moment, the moon no longer felt like a graveyard. But deep beneath the surface, something else awakened. From the shadows of the ruins came a low growl, not human, not machine, but something ancient and angry. Seraphine turned sharply, her eyes flashing crimson. They have felt it, she whispered. The fallen ones have stirred. Elias frowned. Fallen ones. Her voice dropped to a whisper. The corrupted blood of my people. Creatures who lost their minds when the war consumed the moon. They feed on what remains of life. Before Elias could speak again, the ground trembled violently. From the tunnels below, 3 shapes crawled out. Tall, skeletal forms with glowing red veins and faces twisted in agony. Their claws scraped against the stone as they hissed, their eyes locked on Seraphine. She stood unmoving, her expression cold. Once they were my brothers, she said. Now they are hunger given form. Elias backed away, grabbing a broken metal rod from the floor. Seraphine raised her hand, and the air around her rippled, forming a blade of pure crimson light. The creatures screamed and lunged forward. In one fluid motion, she struck, her movements too fast for human eyes. 2 of them fell instantly, their bodies turning to dust. But the third leapt toward Elias, knocking him down. He struggled, holding the rod across its neck as its claws dug into his arm. Blood splattered across the floor, and pain shot through him. Seraphine's eyes widened, and she appeared beside him in a flash. Her hand gripped the creature's throat and crushed it with terrifying strength. The dust scattered into the air, glowing briefly before fading. Elias gasped for breath, looking at his bleeding arm. She knelt beside him, her face close to his, her voice soft but commanding. Do not fear. You are mine to protect. She tore a strip from her cloak and wrapped his wound. Then, without hesitation, she pressed her lips to the blood-soaked cloth. A faint red glow spread through the fabric, and the pain began to fade. Elias stared at her, stunned. What did you do? He whispered. My blood heals, but it binds, she said quietly. Now the moon will know your scent. It will not let you die easily. They rested in silence for a while, the hum of the revived machines filling the air. Elias broke the quiet. So there are more of them? Yes, she said. Many more, and they will not stop until the moon sleeps again or until we are both gone. He looked around, determination in his eyes. Then we don't hide, he said. We fight. Seraphine studied him for a long moment. You are only human. Your body is fragile, yet your heart burns like the sun. Elias smirked. That's what keeps us alive. She turned away, almost smiling. Perhaps that is why the moon chose you. Over the next days, they worked together. Elias repaired old defense systems using parts scavenged from the wreckage. Seraphine showed him how to channel the moon's crimson energy through the machines. When she placed her hands on the controls, they came alive, responding to her presence like loyal beasts. Together they built barriers of light, weapons of sound, and traps powered by the moon's pulse. But every night, Elias noticed her growing weaker. The glow in her eyes dimmed, her voice softened, and sometimes she would vanish for hours. He followed her one night and found her kneeling before the heart crystal, whispering words in an ancient tongue. Her body trembled, and faint trails of energy flowed from her into the crystal. She was feeding it her own life to keep it alive. When she saw him, she turned her face away. You should not see this, she said softly. Elias stepped closer. You're dying to keep this place alive. She shook her head. Not dying, transforming. The bond between my blood and yours is changing me. He stared at her, confused. Changing how? Her red eyes met his. Into something that belongs to both worlds. Before he could reply, a loud rumble shook the chamber. The shadows were rising again, hundreds this time, their shrieks echoing through the canyons. Seraphine stood tall, her sword blazing brighter than ever. She looked at Elias and whispered, The moon tests us now. Human, let us see if your kind can fight beside monsters. Elias grabbed a plasma cutter he had rebuilt and smiled. Let's make sure this moon remembers who we are, he said. Together they faced the storm of shadows, side by side. The dying moon trembled once more, but this time, it was alive with fire and blood. The night on the dying moon burned red. Hundreds of shadow-born creatures poured from the cracks of the ruined ground, their claws scraping, their screams echoing across the hollow plains. Elias stood beside Seraphine, his heart racing but his hands steady. The plasma cutter hummed in his grip, glowing faint blue against the crimson sky. Seraphine's eyes shone like fire, her armor pulsing with light drawn from the moon's core. The air crackled as she raised her blade, and crimson energy streaked through the darkness like lightning. Every swing tore through the corrupted ones, turning them into dust. But for each that fell, more rose from the shadows, crawling, snarling, hungry for her power. Elias fought beside her, striking with the tools he had turned into weapons. He used his engineer's mind, triggering traps, detonating old fuel lines, and overloading broken machines. Each explosion lit the battlefield, and Seraphine moved through the smoke like a storm of light. Her cloak flowed like liquid flame, her movements both savage and graceful. The dying moon shook under their combined fury. Still, Elias knew they couldn't hold forever. He could see her slowing, her steps heavier, the glow in her armor flickering. "Seraphine," he shouted, "you're burning out." She didn't answer. She simply turned toward him with a faint smile. "My blood burns for a reason, human, to protect what is mine." The shadows roared louder, closing in from all sides. Elias slammed his hand against the control panel of a nearby defense turret, sparks flying. The system whirred weakly, half dead, but enough to unleash one last burst of plasma across the horde. The blast sent them scattering, but not for long. Seraphine collapsed to one knee, her sword dimming. Elias ran to her side, catching her before she fell completely. Her skin was cold, her breath shallow, yet her eyes still glowed faintly. "You can't fight like this," he said, voice breaking. She looked up at him, her expression strangely peaceful. "You do not understand, Elias. My kind do not die from battle. We fade when we are forgotten." He shook his head. "I won't let you fade." Her hand reached for his chest, resting over his heart. "The bond has begun," she whispered. "Your blood called to mine. That is why the moon chose you. Only a human heart could wake it." Elias stared at her, confused, scared, but unwilling to pull away. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Her voice softened. "You must let me take what I need." Before he could question her, she leaned forward, her fangs brushing against his neck. He tensed, breath caught, but didn't resist. The bite was sharp, cold, then warm. A rush of light and sound filled his mind. He saw flashes of her memories, the wars, the betrayal, the night her empire fell. He saw her standing alone on the moon as her people turned to dust. And then he felt her loneliness, endless and deep, echoing through the centuries. When she released him, he stumbled but didn't fall. Her color had returned, her wounds fading, her strength glowing once more. Elias touched his neck, feeling the faint mark of her bite. "You're feeding on me," he said, voice trembling. She nodded slowly. "And you are feeding life into me. The bond is complete." He stared at her, breathless. "Does that make me like you?" Her eyes softened. "No, it makes you something new." Before he could speak again, a thunderous sound filled the sky. A massive ship broke through the clouds, black as night, bearing the sigil of the ancient Crimson Line. Seraphine's eyes widened. "Impossible," she whispered. "The old fleet," Elias said. "You mean they're alive?" She shook her head. "Not alive, enslaved by the darkness that took our blood." The ship's lights turned red, and beams of energy struck the surface, burning deep into the ruins. Elias pulled Seraphine to cover as explosions tore through the ground. She clenched her jaw, fury burning in her eyes. "They come to finish what they started," she said, "to claim the heart of the moon and erase me." Elias grinned faintly despite the chaos. "Then they'll have to go through us." Seraphine looked at him with a mix of awe and disbelief. "You fight like my kind, but you bleed like a man." He smiled back. "Maybe that's what makes me dangerous." As the ship descended, the two stood side by side. Her crimson blade hummed with ancient power. His tools glowed with human ingenuity. For the first time, the moon witnessed something it had never seen. A vampire princess and a mortal human standing as one, united by blood and defiance. The dying world trembled, waiting to see who would fall first. And above them, the stars began to move, as if the universe itself was watching their rebellion unfold. The black ship tore through the crimson sky like a blade. Its engines screamed with ancient power, shaking the ground beneath the ruins. Elias and Seraphine watched as its shadow swallowed the horizon. Symbols of the Crimson Line glowed on its hull, but twisted, corrupted, breathing with dark energy. "They were my father's fleet," Seraphine whispered, her voice trembling with rage. They swore to protect the throne, but the curse took them, turned them into vessels of hunger. Elias gritted his teeth, scanning the wrecked towers for cover. Then we end the curse, he said firmly. We stop them. The ship unleashed a volley of red plasma, scorching the canyon walls. Elias grabbed Seraphine's hand and pulled her into a tunnel as fire rained down. Rocks crashed around them, the air filled with the smell of ash and iron. When the rumbling stopped, he turned to her, breathing heavily. We can't outrun that thing, he said. We need to strike back. Seraphine looked at him, her crimson eyes glowing in the dark. There is a way, she said softly. The heart of the moon still holds power. It can release a pulse strong enough to destroy them, but... She hesitated, her voice breaking. It would drain me completely. My life is tied to that heart now. Elias shook his head instantly. No, we'll find another way. She smiled sadly. There is no other way, human. He stood in silence, the weight of her words pressing down on him. The thought of losing her felt like losing the light of this dying world. But before he could argue, a deep metallic roar echoed through the tunnels. The ship had sent drones, tall, spider-like machines with glowing red eyes. They crawled through the passages, scanning for movement. Elias motioned for her to stay low, then grabbed a broken power conduit from the wall. He jammed it into a nearby panel and forced energy into it, creating a makeshift EMP charge. When the drones approached, he triggered it. The explosion sent sparks flying, and the machines fell twitching to the ground. Seraphine's eyes widened slightly. You fight with no magic, no power, yet you create miracles. He laughed weakly. We humans call it improvising. They emerged from the tunnel into the open crater where the heart's light shone faintly beneath the dust. Above, the ship descended lower, mechanical arms extending, reaching toward the moon's core. Seraphine raised her hand, summoning a wave of crimson energy that cracked across the sky. The ship staggered, its shields flickering. But the energy backlash hit her too, making her stumble. Elias caught her, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. Her skin was ice cold, her voice barely a whisper. It's time, she said. Take me to the heart. He shook his head. You'll die? Her gaze softened. Maybe, but you will live, and that means this world will remember me. He wanted to argue, but the sky split open as the ship prepared another strike. He knew they had no time. Together they ran toward the glowing chamber of the heart. The massive crystal pulsed weakly, like a dying heartbeat. Seraphine placed her hands upon it, the crimson veins on her skin lighting up. She began to chant in the ancient tongue, her voice echoing through the cavern. The ground trembled as energy surged from her body into the heart. Elias felt the heat, the vibration, the power rising like a storm. He grabbed her arm, desperate. Seraphine, stop, it's killing you. She looked back, tears in her glowing eyes. It's not death, Elias, it's my choice. Then she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. I claimed you because I saw the fire that never fades, humanity's light. Now you must carry it. The crystal blazed, flooding the chamber with crimson light. Outside, the moon erupted with a massive pulse. The black ship's shield shattered, its engines tearing apart. Flames and fragments rained down like stars as the fleet was consumed by the light. Elias shielded his face as the blast shook the entire surface. When the light faded, silence returned. The sky was calm again, but the heart no longer glowed. Elias fell to his knees beside it, searching for her. All he found was her cloak, resting gently on the crystal, faintly warm. He whispered her name again and again, but only the echo of his voice answered. Outside, the moon's surface shimmered, not in death, but in rebirth. Crimson flowers began to bloom from the dust, glowing softly under the starlight. Elias stood, looking at the endless horizon. She kept her promise, he said quietly, and now I'll keep mine. He turned toward the stars, ready to carry her story beyond this moon. And somewhere deep within the crystal, a heartbeat echoed once more, faint but alive. The moon was quiet again. The wind that once screamed now drifted gently through the canyons, carrying the scent of metal and ash. Elias stood where the heart of the moon had burned with crimson light, its glow now only a faint pulse deep within the stone. He had lost Seraphine in that final burst, and though the sky was peaceful, the silence cut deeper than any wound. Days passed in a blur. Time had no meaning here. He repaired what he could, gathering food rations from the wrecks, patching his damaged suit, surviving. But every night when he closed his eyes, he heard her voice, soft, distant, like the echo of a dream. Elias, don't forget the light. At first, he thought it was his imagination, yet the more he listened, the clearer it became. One evening, as the red moon rose over the horizon, he returned to the heart's chamber. The great crystal was dim, but when he touched it, warmth spread through his hand. Suddenly, the entire chamber flickered to life, ancient symbols lighting across the walls. A soft glow formed before him, and there she was, Seraphine, but not in flesh, in light, translucent and radiant. He fell to his knees, his voice shaking. Seraphine. She smiled, the same soft smile that had once turned the cold void into warmth. You kept your promise, she said gently. You stayed. Elias reached out, his hand passing through the light. You're alive. Her expression was calm, not alive as before. The heart bound me to its core. I am part of this moon now. I see through its eyes. I feel through its light. He lowered his gaze. You sacrificed everything. She moved closer, her voice soft as the wind. Not everything. I kept what matters, my bond with you. Outside, faint vibrations shook the surface. Elias looked up. What is that? The pulse that destroyed the fleet reached the void beyond, she said. Others will come, drawn by power or vengeance. You must be ready. He frowned. I'm just one man. Her eyes glowed brighter. You are more than that, Elias Rayner. You are the bridge between blood and light. He turned toward the shattered consoles, an idea forming in his mind. If the heart still holds power, I can use it to send a signal, maybe call for help, maybe warn Earth. Seraphine's voice trembled. If you link human machines to the heart, it could tear your mind apart. He smiled faintly. You used to say humans are stubborn, remember? She laughed softly, a sound like music in the hollow air. Then I will guide you. For hours, he worked, guided by her whispers, his hands moving across the alien panels. Circuits glowed crimson, the air shimmered with energy, and the heart began to hum again. Sweat rolled down his face, every breath heavy, but he didn't stop. When the final connection locked, a surge of light filled the chamber. The heart's energy poured through the machines, rising toward the sky like a beacon. Elias fell to the ground, his body trembling from the strain. Seraphine knelt beside his fading consciousness, her hand of light resting over his heart. You've awakened the signal, she said. It will call across the stars, not just to humans, but to all who still listen. He forced a weak smile. Then maybe they'll remember you too. She leaned close, her voice a whisper. They will remember us. Outside, the moon's surface bloomed with glowing lines, vast patterns of crimson stretching across craters and valleys. From orbit, it looked like a heartbeat shining through stone. In that rhythm, life began to stir again, the old ruins breathing, the air filling with faint warmth. Elias opened his eyes and saw her fading form. Will I see you again? He asked. Her answer was soft. Always, as long as the moon remembers your name. He looked toward the endless stars, feeling the faint pulse of her presence through every breath. The dying world was no longer dead, and neither was he. He stood, adjusting the broken transmitter on his arm, and sent a final message into the void. This is Elias Rayner, survivor of the Crimson Moon, not lost, not alone. Above, the stars shimmered as if answering him. And somewhere deep inside the heart, the voice of the vampire princess whispered back, and never forgotten. Weeks turned into months. The once dead moon had begun to breathe again. Crimson light pulsed gently beneath its surface, feeding new life into old ruins. Elias lived among those ruins, repairing, building, listening to the whispers of Seraphine that drifted through the air like soft wind. Each dawn, he would wake beneath the faint red glow of the heart and whisper, "Good morning, princess." And though she no longer stood beside him in flesh, her voice always replied, "You rise with the moon, Elias." He had stopped feeling alone long ago. Her presence lived in every heartbeat of the world around him. One day, while exploring the northern ridge, Elias saw a flicker of light high in the black sky. At first he thought it was a star, but then it moved, steady, slow, unmistakable. A ship, human-made, approaching the moon. His heart pounded as the beacon he had activated weeks ago finally answered. He ran back to the heart's chamber, his voice shaking with excitement. Seraphine, they're coming. Her image shimmered before him, faint but smiling. I know, she said softly. The signal reached them. Your people have not forgotten you. He paused, realizing something in her tone, a quiet sadness beneath her words. You don't sound happy. Her light flickered. Because when they come, you will have to choose, Elias. He looked at her, confused. Choose what? To return to your world, she said. Or remain here, where your blood now binds you. He fell silent, the weight of the choice sinking into his chest. She continued, her voice calm but distant. If you leave, the moon will sleep again, the heart will fade, and my memory will fall into silence. But if you stay, you will never see your world again. Elias stared at the glowing crystal that held her essence. Everything he once was, an engineer, a soldier, a man from Earth, felt like a story from another lifetime. He walked to the edge of the chamber and looked up through the broken roof. The stars seemed closer now, as if listening. He whispered, I promised you, I'd keep your light alive. When the rescue ship landed hours later, the silence of the moon broke with the sound of human voices. Commander Rayner, do you copy? He stood at the ridge watching them, their suits gleaming under the crimson sky. They found him quickly, staring at the horizon like a statue carved from stone. The captain's voice echoed in his headset. We thought you were dead. Elias smiled faintly. Maybe I was. As they prepared to leave, the captain placed a hand on his shoulder. Come home, Elias. You've done enough here. He looked back at the glowing ruins, the faint hum of the moon's pulse still alive beneath his feet. And in that moment, he heard her voice one last time, clear and warm. Whatever you choose, my heart will follow. He closed his eyes, a single tear falling. Then he turned toward the heart's chamber and whispered to the crew. There's something I need to finish first. He descended alone, the sound of his steps echoing through the ancient halls. When he reached the crystal, it shimmered softly, waiting. He placed his hand on it and spoke gently. Seraphine, I can't leave you. Not while your light still burns. Her voice surrounded him, full of quiet joy. Then you have chosen my mate. The chamber brightened, crimson energy flowing into his body, wrapping him in warmth and silence. The humans above saw a surge of red light rise from the moon. Their sensors went wild, and then the signal vanished. When they searched the ruins, they found no trace of Elias Rayner, only a single glowing flower growing beside the great crystal. Years later, the moon became a legend. Explorers spoke of red lights seen from orbit, of whispers carried through comms when no one spoke. Some said it was haunted, others said it was protected. But those who listened closely swore they heard a man's voice in the static, calm and strong, saying, This world still lives, and so does she. And in the silence of the cosmos, the crimson moon pulsed softly, two hearts beating as one, the human and the princess, guardians of a love that defied death, time, and the endless dark of space.